Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Missing Link in Your Healing. This is the podcast where we bring you the parts that you might not necessarily know or that might not be obvious to you. We pride ourselves on bringing a holistic view and pieces of the puzzle to broaden your mind and help yourself heal from within. Healing is a multifaceted and very individual journey. So we want you to take what resonates the most with you so that you can play a very big role in becoming your own healer from the inside out. And Loretta and I made a decision today to actually do something. Once again, we thought we would never do. That seems to be happening quite often. We're going to talk about aging, actually, and looking at aging while you're healthy. So this is not for sick people per se, but it's about how to age well. But we are going to, as always, bring what we think might be a huge missing link or two to aging well and graciously. So with that, I'm handing over to Loretta because she's the expert today. Thanks, Loretta.
Thank you. I just want to say also that, yes, it is about, you don't have to be sick, but if you are sick, then this is another reason why you want to work on these missing links, because it's going to determine the quality with which you age. So, we think of being ill and then healing. Well, it's not just about getting over what you've currently got or creating something. It's about creating a new life for yourself. So just a few things around aging. So we are societally programmed that to retire from our work. Those of us who have careers, we're societally programmed. For women, it's 60. In South Africa, it's certainly 60. And for men, it's 65. Some people tend to be able to prolong their careers beyond that. But unless you work for yourself, and even if you work for yourself and you have worked really, really hard, that carrot at the end of the career stick seems to be retirement. And the age, as I said, is between 60 and 65 for most people. And so we have this idea societally that once we retire, that's the time when we can get to enjoy our lives. Now, enjoying your life looks different for different people, but we also have an assumption that that's when the challenges are no longer going to be there. So our children have grown up, we've hopefully made enough money, we've been successful in business, blah, 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 whatever it is, we've done this career, and now it's our time. And so many people, when they get to retirement, get sick. So, and there's a reason for that. And one of the reasons is because we're addicted to support and we're repulsed by challenge. And so when we think that the challenges only exist during the times of our lives when we're working, growing our families, doing whatever it is we're doing, and that then once we reach this magical, mythical age of 65, then all challenge needs to fall away, because now we're in that enjoy your part of your life. Well, here's the thing. When you only want to be supported, you become stagnant. John DeMartini used to say, when you ripen, you rot. When you green, you grow. It's a very graphic image, but that is if you're now ripe, you've done, you've been there, you've done that, you've accomplished and created what you wanted to create, and now you are going to stagnate. Well, stagnation equals atrophy, basically. When fruit stays on the tree and it doesn't get picked and it doesn't get eaten, it eventually rots. So that's important for us to recognize that. The other thing is that those of us, whether we've had careers or grown families, all of us, because of the societal idea that at 60 or 65, excuse me, we retire, many of us who have our identities wrapped up in our families, the children that we've produced and grown, the careers that we've produced and grown, the education we've acquired, whatever, we now no longer have that. And so we start losing our identity. And if we don't actually understand that this is an opportunity for us to create something new, this is not a time of stagnation. Humans are creatures of growth. We want to grow and expand. When we don't allow ourselves that, it doesn't have to look like your career did for the last 30 years. I'm not saying you have to carry on working. All I'm saying is that we are creative beings. We can't just sit around doing nothing for the last 30 years of our lives, all right, and expect ourselves to be fulfilled. And that's the time when we tend to revert more to our old coping mechanisms and coping strategies, or we find new ones. We become more sociable. Antoinette and I were talking about this earlier. We start drinking more, maybe because we party more. We are more sociable. So, more glasses of wine, more rich food, more, I don't know, whatever. Okay. And it might not even look like that for you. The point I'm trying to make is that we are creatures of growth. And so that desire that we have to create doesn't just go to sleep because we've retired. And we lose a lot of what we believe is our identity. And if we don't have a way of actually discovering more identity or new things that we can connect to, then it leads to more stagnation. And then the last thing is that we have this idea that decline and deterioration is inevitable. Now, I am going to say this. Decline actually is inevitable, because if we didn't decline, we'd all stay 35 forever. But deterioration is not inevitable. So I have a client at the moment, he's 45, very fit, very like lots of exercise, a runner, paddler, lean, eats well, blah, 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 blah. Very, very high stress CEO of a company. And he has some health issues. And we were talking about them the other day, and he said, you know what? Everyone I talk to says to me, how old are you? And I go 45. And they go, well, this is the beginning of it. This is what happens. You're never going to be able to maintain your activity the way you normally do. So you've just got to accept where you are. And he's just like, well, bollocks to that. I'm not accepting that. And I am 100% in that camp, because that is part of the programming. We don't even realize that it's happening in our minds, but it is, because it's like, well, you can't do at 50 what you could do at 20. Well, I want to tell you, I can physically do some things at 50, 55 almost, that I couldn't do at 20. So, and listen, and all of you know, I'm no like Jock, eh? I'm not like Ms. Sports. So honestly, if I can do it, anybody can do it, all right? So that it's important that we examine the stories that we have about aging and what it means. The last thing I'm going to mention about this part, and this is just the preamble, is we all live as if we're not going to get old. Hello. That is, if you are lucky, you are going to get old. Actually, because if you're not going to get old, it means you're going to die much sooner than then, which is also maybe not necessarily the worst thing. But you know what? When you are 30, you might go, oh, well, I don't have to worry about this because, it's still another 40 years until I'm 70. If you don't die before that, it's inevitable that you're going to get to that. And yes, the decline is inevitable, but deterioration, it's like pain is inevitable in life, but suffering is optional. The deterioration is optional. So, okay, that's my intro. So I'm going to just very quickly talk about the physical things because they are important, of course. Oh, wait, I want to just say this thing. It's like insurance. When you're 30, you might go, well, I don't need life insurance because I don't have any kids. But when you're 35 and you have a family, you might go, oh my goodness, I need life insurance. But it's more difficult to get life insurance without having anything excluded at 35 and more expensive than if you just took the life insurance policy out at 22. Right? So you might go, well, I'll worry about that when I get there. I'm going to tell you today why you don't want to wait until you get there to worry about it. And I don't want you to worry about it. This is not scaremongering. It's just information. It's information that you can use to make your own choice, because at the end of the day, you are your own healer and you are the creator of your life. And so this is an opportunity for you to decide, how do I want to create my life? So let's just talk about the obvious ones. Antoinette was saying, well, this is like telling people the sky is blue. Okay, so I'm going to just tell you that the sky is blue. The obvious things in terms of improving your health outcomes as you age is to eat a whole food diet. Real food, not stuff out of packets and with preservatives and bloody, okay? To follow an anti-inflammatory diet, because chronic inflammation is the biggest cause of all chronic disease. It's the common denominator in heart disease, dementia, neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's, diabetes, the cancer, the big killers, right? So following an anti-inflammatory diet is important. Moving enough. There is a condition of aging called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia means we lose muscle mass as we age. Now, I don't have the stats. This starts, I don't know, the ones who really want to terrify us, the guys who want us to pump a lot of iron will probably say it starts at like 35. I don't know that it starts at 35. And quite frankly, I don't know that the drama that is made about sarcopenia is actually necessary. But the truth is, we lose muscle mass as we age, and it becomes more difficult to gain muscle mass as we age, because of this condition called sarcopenia. So if you're sedentary and your muscles are a certain size, as you age, those muscles are going to deteriorate. And this is not about like how buffed and toned you are. This is about, can you get up out of a chair? Can you stop yourself if you trip on a carpet? Can you balance when you are washing your feet in the shower? That's what I'm talking about, okay? So it is really important that we have cardiovascular exercise for our heart and lung health, but more importantly, as we age, weight-bearing exercise, resistance training, weight training becomes imperative, because without muscles, we cannot move effectively. You can't carry your groceries. You can't reach for something on a high shelf. You can't bend down to get something out of a cupboard. And in fact, if you do that, you increase your chance of falling over. You increase your risk of banging your head. In fact, I heard a very alarming statistic, and I'm going to mess this up a little bit. It was in a short little thing that I saw on a podcast. Something like, it's something like people who fall and break something, regardless of if you like over 50, let's just say let's say over 60, if you fall and break something like 17 to 18% of those people will never recover fully. Some of those people will actually die, and your function deteriorates more rapidly thereafter. Okay. So, I mean, I know this is scary, but honestly, it's the truth. So if we want to have a good quality, if you want to be mobile in your old age, you need muscles, and you need muscles that work, and you need muscles that are strong. You also need to be able to balance. So balancing things are really important, like Pilates or yoga, or just simple, standing on one leg, and just seeing how long you can hold it there, right? Balancing exercises is really, really important. Flexibility and mobility, right? So like, how rapidly can you move your feet? Can you do lateral kind of movements? Because all of those, if you've got a full range of motion, you're going to be able potentially to stop yourself from falling, which is really, really important. Another really important part of aging is social interactions. It's the quality of the relationships that we have. And this can be hugely problematic, especially if you start outliving your family and your friends. And this is also why it's really important that we work on cultivating new relationships also as we age, okay? And this sounds really mercenary. It's like, in case the friends you have all die. Well, you know what? That is reality, okay? So loneliness is one of the biggest predictors of poor health outcomes for anyone, but particularly for older people. So when we lose our sense of purpose, when we lose our connection to our family, and this is tied into this idea that once again, when we get older, we have no value. So if you're waiting for the world to value you as you age, you're going to wait a long time. You need to create value for yourself as you age. So once again, this is our opportunity to step in and be our own healers. So I just want to mention, a few terms. We've got a lifespan, and then we have what's called a health span. I don't actually know who coined the term health span, but your health span is how long you have to be healthy, and your lifespan is how long you have to live. And what happens for most people is our lifespan far outstrips our health span. So we live for longer than we are healthy. And this is problematic, right? And Dr. Peter Attia, he's a longevity, he's an expert. He's written a book on longevity. You can look him up. He talks about something called the marginal decade. And he says the marginal decade is the last 10 years of your life. Now, there isn't an age for that. It's the last 10 years of however long your life is going to be, right? And he says that we don't prepare for the marginal decade. So the marginal decade is usually the time where you have the falls, you break the hip, you have to, that's the marginal decade, right? And he says that what we want to do is you want to ask yourself, what do I want to be able to do in the last 10 years of my life? Like, do I want to be able to drive? Do I want to be able to carry my own groceries? Do I want to be able to go for hikes? Do I want to be able to walk? What do I want to be able to do? And once you've decided what that is, then what you want to do is you want to make that your training goal. And you want to start training now for that. So that could be engaging a personal trainer to get your muscles going. It could be joining a yoga class. It might look like different things for you. I don't want to belabor this because I actually want to talk about some other things that I think are just as important. But it's important that we bear this in mind. You know, are you working on your lifespan or are you working on your health span? I can tell you now, modern medicine is working on your lifespan. It can keep you alive for a long time. It's not working on your health span. Don't wait for your GP or your specialist to help you with your health span, because that's not their job, actually. All right. It's your job to work on your health span. And honestly, none of us can sit around and go, I don't have enough information. We have the internet. It's loaded with information. Okay. So start somewhere. All right. So now I want to talk about maybe some of the stuff that you haven't thought about in terms of aging. In fact, I want to give you an explanation of what happens energetically when we age. Right. So in Oriental medicine, especially in Chinese medicine, I'm going to speak about Chinese medicine. In Chinese medicine, they say, hold on, let me just preface this. If you haven't watched any or listened to any of the previous episodes, we all have physical organs, and then those organs have what we call an organ function energy. So think of it like you have your physical organ, and then it has like a little aura. It has its own little energy aura or its little energy blueprint. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking so much about the physical. I'll tell you when I'm talking about the physical, okay? But your energy blueprint, the little aura of, let's say, your kidney, controls to a large extent the health of your kidney. So changes happen energetically before they happen physically. Just like when you have a goal, right? Let's say your goal is you want to gain 5 kilograms of muscle mass. You first have the thought, I want to gain 5 kilograms of muscle mass. Then you take action on finding someone who can help you gain 5 kilograms of muscle mass, and then you take the action. It happens energetically first, and then physically it happens. And only over time do you see the 5 kilograms of muscle developing, all right? So it's the same with the organ energetics. It changes in the organ, and then only it changes in the organ energy. And then only does it change in the physical organ. So in Chinese medicine, they say the kidney organ function energy is the reservoir of your life force. They call it qi, right? So you get born with a certain amount of life force, and it is housed, its reservoir is in your kidney. And your kidney also controls the health of your adrenal glands. And your adrenal glands produce, amongst other things, your stress coping hormones and regulates your stress response. Now, your adrenal gland, in terms of health, is associated with your sense of purpose. Do you feel like you, and I'm not talking about saving the world. I'm not talking about world peace. I'm just talking about, do you feel as if you have some sort of value? Purpose is you have a reason for getting up in the morning. That's what I'm talking about. Your purpose could be creating the most beautiful garden in your backyard that has ever been seen in the universe. Only going to be appreciated by you and a few people. That's a purpose, all right? Doesn't have to be ending war, all right? Or saving orphans or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be like that, okay? Your purpose literally could be traveling the world and meeting as many people as you can and expanding your experience of life. Could be absolutely anything, but your adrenal glands are associated with your purpose and the value that you believe that you have. So I just want to take this right back to episode number, 1, 2, 3, or 4. I can't even remember. It's one of the very early ones. Whatever you believe to be true about yourself is going to determine whether you believe you have any sort of value. And if you don't understand what those unconscious beliefs are, then you don't have the opportunity to choose differently, because that's just going to be running you on autopilot. So a lot of people who go, I don't know what my purpose is. Well, first of all, it's because you have these ideas of what you think purpose means. That can be the first stumbling block. And the second one is, because we don't want to look, because what if it's something that's going to make us uncomfortable or we don't want to do? That's a common one. And the third one is, well, what if I can never do that? I'm going to feel like a big fat failure. Well, you know what? That particular version of, what if I fail is run very often by your unconscious limiting beliefs. So it's important that we know what those are. This is why don't wait until you're 75 to try and uncover an unconscious belief. It's going to be almost impossible. Do it when you're 50. Do it when you're 30 if you can, because do it when you're 20, actually, because the sooner you realize what it is, the sooner you can actually start empowering yourself despite it. Okay. So the kidney organ function energy, the emotion is fear, deep-seated survival fear. And the kidney is associated with the second chakra, which is an energy center in the body. And that is around power in close relationships. So that's like power with your family members. And I don't mean overpowering. I mean power dynamics in relationships, with a colleague, with a boss, with a lover, with a spouse, with a mother, with a sister, with a brother, whoever. Okay. And it regulates money, because that's security for most of us. Ethics, what are you prepared to do in order to survive? And what are the power dynamics like in your relationships? What is the quality of your relationships? And that's why relationships are so important throughout our whole lives, and particularly when we age. And loneliness and isolation is literally a disease of the elderly. They get put away in homes, and I'm not knocking anyone that's ever had to do that. I'm just saying, right? A lot of the elderly they're neglected, literally, and they are emotionally neglected, okay, as well as physically for some people, right? So another important thing to know is that the kidney controls the health of the muscles. So remember, I just told you about sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is inevitable as we age, because as we age, our kidney chi drops. We've used our life force. So when you do things that burn up your life force, all right, and I'm not going to even mention any of them because I don't want to sound like I'm preaching, or whether you do things that enhance your life force is going to determine how quickly the chi leaks out of your kidney. But your kidney controls the health of your muscles. So when you are working your muscles, or when you are aware of what's happening in terms of your fears, these issues that I've just spoken about, your sense of purpose in terms of your adrenals, your connection to other people, the health of your relationships, how secure you feel in the world, your fear around things like money and security, physical security, like, am I going to die? And am I going to die becomes much more real as you get older. So there's going to be a ramping up of that anyway. So can you see how all of this confluences to weaken this? This is why I said decline is inevitable, because as the kidney chi gets out of our, as we use it up, so we get to the end of our lives. But the deterioration, a lot of that can actually be controlled. So
Loretta, maybe you should give us some of those examples without feeling that you're being preachy, because maybe.
Okay, so I mean, things like not sleeping enough, burning the candle at both ends, working too hard, and then having to play really hard to compensate. So drinking too much alcohol, smoking, using recreational drugs. And I don't mean like addicts. I mean, when I say recreational drugs, I don't mean mainlining heroin. I mean going to a party and snorting cocaine. It's very common. Lots of people do it, okay? For some people, it can be too many what do they call it, medicine ceremonies, too much ayahuasca, too much iboga, too much LSD, too much of those things, right? Too much of it's the too muches. It's all the too muches. Okay. I'm retired now, so I don't have to exercise. For example, I mean, I don't know that anyone really says that, okay? Or this whole thing about, I've injured my knee, so I can't exercise. No, that's bollocks. There are loads of things that you can do, sitting or lying, and that's what professionals are for, guys. And if you don't want to go to a professional, consult someone on the internet even, okay? It's the excuses are also the excuses we make, and we all make them. We're all guilty of this, right? So like, well, I can't do this. I used to be a runner, but since I injured my knee, I've stopped exercising. Well, why didn't you just start a different kind of exercise? Who said you have to carry on being a runner, right? That's what I mean by creating something new, all right? So one thing that I do want to mention is that the kidney controls your muscles. So it controls your skeletal muscles, right? The muscles that help us live, but it also controls all the muscles in the muscle walls of your organs, particularly of your blood vessels. So what happens when we get older? We have an increase in heart disease. We have an increase in arteriosclerosis. We have vascular dementia, right? And they used to call it hardening of the arteries. So think literally, you have a hardening of your blood vessels. So your heart has to work more. What do you think your heart is made out of? Muscle. It's made out of muscle, guys. It's a muscle, all right? So this sounds like, oh, well, so it's just your kidneys and renals. No. It's the muscle wall of your intestine. It's how well your intestine can contract. It's how easily you have a bowel motion or not. It also is all the sphincters, the valve that keeps your bowel from becoming incontinent, or your bladder from becoming incontinent, or your stomach from allowing food to pass into and out of it effectively. So all of this is regulated through your muscles. Now, the plot thickens, my friends, because there is a relationship between your kidney and your heart and small intestine. So if you just think physically, your heart pumps, first of all, your heart pumps oxygenated blood to your body. It receives deoxygenated blood that it sends to your lungs so that it can be oxygenated, so it can go back to your heart, so your heart can send it to the rest of your body. So without the blood getting to where it needs to go, you don't have any food coming in for the cells. You don't have oxygen coming into the cells, and you don't have waste being taken out of the cells. So it's quite important, right? Okay. So the small intestine is where all your food is digested and absorbed. So your stomach doesn't digest. It does. The first part of protein digestion happens in your stomach. That is all. The rest of what happens in your stomach is basically turning the food into a mush, a pulp, so that when it gets into your small intestine, it can be acted on by digestive enzymes so that it can be digested. And the reason why your small intestine is longer than 5 meters is because the first part of your small intestine is where certain food gets digested along certain bits. So carbohydrates in one part and fats in somewhere else and proteins in a different part. And then the second part of your small intestine is where these things are absorbed from. So your small intestine receives all the nourishment, literally your physical nourishment goes to your small intestine. Your small intestine sorts it, allows it to be broken via the enzymes, and then determines what gets absorbed where. And then it goes into your blood, gets taken off to your liver, gets detoxified, and then it gets distributed to the rest of your body. So your heart and your small intestine are super important. Now, energetically, your heart receives love and distributes love. And the emotion associated with your heart and small intestine is joy. Now, the downside of this joy is, they call it excess joy in Chinese medicine. This is pretending that you're happy when you're not. Being positive when the pawpaw's striking the fan. Not being honest about how you really feel. Trying to whitewash everything. Avoiding looking at your shadow or your darkness. Because, if you do that, you let the darkness in, and we're all about the light, okay? So that is it's most detrimental to your heart and your small intestine. And your small intestine enables your ability to receive. So when the heart is healthy, it radiates. It allows us to have radiance. And when the kidney organ function energy is unwell, so there's the elements, right? The heart and small intestine are associated with the fire element, and the bladder and kidney are associated with the water element. And those are the two most diametrically opposed elements in the Chinese medicine theory. And in Chinese medicine, they say when the kidney becomes too controlling, it swallows the fire of the heart. That's when we get heart failure, right? Because heart failure, everything becomes watery. The water element swallows the fire. And if the fire element is too controlling, it burns the kidney out. It basically burns out your life force. So the fear kidney affects our fear, our conscious and unconscious fears, right back to, as I said, episode number whatever, early. Determines
Loretta, sorry, I'll put all the episode numbers in the show notes because you've mentioned 3 already. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. So your ability to recognize your fears, conscious and unconscious, and work with them determines your capacity to experience joy. Now, when you get sick, it can be a really strong impetus for you to do that. What I'm like begging and pleading is, don't wait until you get sick, guys. You don't have to do the uncovering what's running you unconsciously and stepping into your creative power when you're sick. It's harder when you're sick. It's easier on the one hand because you're more motivated. So you're more on it, It's like you're really super motivated, so you tend to do the work. But it's more difficult because you've got to do the work around feeling awful and the increased fear around your illness. So, it's essentially balanced. Okay. So this is why this is so important, because we don't just want health span. We want joy span towards the end of our lives as well, right? We don't just want to be healthy. We want to feel inspired and fulfilled. And so when your heart and small intestine organ function energy is compromised by your kidney organ function, they're supposed to be regulating each other. So when there's too much fire, the kidney produces a bit of water, which calms it down. When there's not enough fire, too much water, the fire heats the water up and some of it evaporates. It's a regulating relationship. It's not unhealthy. When it's healthy, it allows everything to operate super well. It literally allows you to connect to what is true in terms of what you fear and what is true in terms of what you'd love to create. And it sets up that creative tension. It literally sets up the tension for life, for you to express life through you. So it's a great thing. When it's not in balance, it becomes problematic, and your body, and not just your body, your thinking and your feeling and your physicality and the health of your relationships, the health of your life is going to be reflecting to you whether there's a balance there or not. And can the balance always be perfect? Oh, I don't think so. Does it matter? No. We just don't want it to be so out of balance that, we end up aging disgracefully instead of aging gracefully. Okay. So the one thing I also wanted to tell you was the heart and the small intestine regulates the health of the bones. So what is one of the most common causes of fractures in aging people is a loss of bone mass. And here's the thing, the more muscle you have on your skeleton, the more bone gets mineralized. The less muscle you have, the less bone gets mineralized. Bone is constantly breaking down and building up, breaking down and building up. But the building up slows down as we get older, and the breaking down increases as we get older. So when we are no longer experiencing the joy of life, then we can start becoming brittle. So the kidney, when the kidney energy starts waning, the muscles become brittle, they sclerose. And when the heart and small intestine organ function energy starts declining, then our bones become brittle. And I didn't say this with the kidney, but in the same way in which it affects our physical brittleness, it affects our mental and emotional and energetic brittleness also. So the more this energy deteriorates and the more imbalanced it becomes, the more fixed we become about what we believe, the less we're able to be flexible and change our thinking. How many of you have ever tried to change the habit of an 80-year-old? Or notice that as your parents age, they seem to become sort of more, their negative thinking patterns become sort of almost more ingrained, right? Who's ever seen anyone, not anyone, but like most people of a certain age, they become very fixed in what they believe, right? So, if they were a racist when they were 50, they're like a super racist when they're 75. No offense. In fact, anyway, I'm thinking of someone in my own family now. Okay. And it doesn't matter what you say. They just go, well, that's how I am. So the older we get, the more we identify with, this is how I am. It cannot be changed. which is why this is incredibly difficult to shift when you are already in the marginal decade. Let's not wait until then. We need more than crossword puzzles and Sudoku to maintain our cognitive function. It's not just about how well does your brain work, guys. It's about how flexible are you in terms of being able to appreciate there could be a different point of view, or that someone else's point of view may have validity, or there might be a different way of doing things, or the fact that you don't have to be the way you've always been. Because the way you've always been is a habit of what you've always thought and always believed about yourself. The older you are, the more difficult that is to change. So I'm going to, I know I'm rabbiting on a lot. I'm going to just want to mention a couple of conditions, diseases that happen as we age, and what is actually going on energetically with those diseases. And I've already spoken about this a little bit before, right? So one of them is heart conditions, heart attacks, heart failure, heart murmurs, valve replacements, the issues around the arteries, slightly different to heart disease, but, having to have triple bypasses and things like that. When the heart, physical heart, is compromised, it's because we have had difficulty expressing emotion our whole life. And so again, and I say this to every single client I have, and you know what, by session 4 or 5, they've forgotten about the emotional thing because no one wants to go there. The ability to be flexible in terms of feeling and expressing your emotion is literally affecting your heart's function. All right. When people have heart issues, they often feel as if they're not worthy of being paid attention to. Now we're back to the loneliness issue and the I have no value. All right. Our heart is, I said, it's radiance, it's I radiate. It literally, that energy of your heart is your connection to the world. So the more you start feeling isolated and cut off from the world because you're no longer taking part in the world, because when you're old, you just have no use any longer, which is our Western societal view. No matter what anybody says, that is how it works. Of course, your heart literally starts breaking. It literally starts breaking. Another very common one as we get older is dementia. So dementia is an easy one because dementia is about refusing to accept the world as it is and wanting to rebel against it, because it feels restrictive and controlling and we feel out of control. That's big, right? And so, yes, of course, it's got to do with heavy metals and all the physical things, but we cannot discount this, because if you know anyone with dementia, if you've seen anyone with dementia, it literally is a clocking out of life. They clock out from the world, and that's because they refuse to accept it as it is. They can no longer live in it the way it is, because of this restriction and control. So it's actually an unconscious act of rebellion, right? And they feel stuck. And this is often because in childhood, they were made to feel hopeless and disempowered. And that hopelessness and that disempowerment has continued throughout their life. So an interesting thing I thought about last night in the shower is, and I don't know about the statistics for this, so please, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that dementia is more common in women than men. It occurs more, Alzheimer's is definitely more common in women than it is in men, all right? And I know that there are different types of dementia, not just Alzheimer's, but, and women, just think of women in terms of, women have felt possibly restricted. If you were a woman and you're now in your 80s and you've been married for the last 50 years and you grew up in an age where, the man was right and he was the head of the household. And I'm not disputing this. If you believe that, that's fine. But it's not the system. It's how do you feel within the system? If you have been overlooked for promotions because you were a woman, if you were told that you were hormonal when you were trying to express your feelings because you were a woman, that's restriction, right? And it's not only women, men have this too. If you were a man and you were told that your job is to provide for your family no matter what, no matter how badly you get treated by your family, your spouse, that you've got to stick in the same job that is thankless, that no one appreciates you for, and you've got to go work for 40 years so that, blah, blah. That's also, it's caged. It's being caged not just by the strictures of society. It's caged by the stories in our minds. And this comes from those beliefs and the trauma that we experienced when we were children, which is why we don't have to spend 30 years on the analyst's couch, but at least just acknowledge that, this happened when I was a child and I was terrified, or I'm so angry. I can love my parents and be furious at them at the same time. And it's okay for me to be furious. All right. Just at least acknowledge that. The last one I'm going to speak about is tumors, because that's another very common one as we get older, right? And tumors essentially they're an unconscious, these are not all tumors now, hey? All right. So, I mean, this is just a category, right? So we're not talking about specific cancers, or they're not all malignant, but just generally growths, right? They are self-sabotage driven by feelings of not deserving the good things in life. So I'm going to take us back to, you've got to suffer and struggle and work really hard so that when you retire, you can experience the good things in life. But if you have a belief that that is not for you, or if you identify with struggle, with being recognized, this is another very big thing with tumors, being recognized as a strong person who can overcome adversity, and you feel validated by that, and that becomes a very important part of your identity. This is what happens when you retire. Let's just say that you've got you've got enough money, you're relatively okay, right? You're good, right? And now you're going to enjoy your life. If your life suddenly becomes easy, but you are identified with being the person that overcomes challenges and struggle, because that's what you've done your whole life. But now you, in theory, have no struggle. Either your relationships are going to go to pot, or you're going to get sick, because your identity needs challenge in order to be strong. This is really important. And so, I mean, I might have sound like I'm saying all of this because, like, ooh, you're going to get old and terrible things are going to happen. It's not at all. It is to just illustrate that we don't only think about these things. These things are not only important when we get sick. So the bulk of my work is working with people who are ill. And the reason why that is the bulk of my work is because I've been in the health game my whole career, but also because I know that that's when people, when they've got their backs to the wall, they really are prepared to do this. But I also have clients who are not sick necessarily, and who maybe I have some delightful young clients at the moment, and most of them have like relationship issues. Whether you work this stuff out through your relationships, or whether you work it out through an illness, or whether you just actually spend a bit of time asking yourself, how do I want the rest of my life to be? Do I want it to be a reflection of how my life has been so far? And do I want that to continue? And not saying that your life so far is bad. I'm just saying, look at the things that have been negative, like maybe your health. That is not going to get better without you making any kind of effort, I'm afraid. It's not going to change. I wish we could just take those blinkers and those rose-tinted spectacles off, because the more flexible we become in all areas, the more we don't only increase our lifespan, but we increase our joy span. Antoinette, I'm done. Over to you.
Well, no, you don't need to be done. I mean, it's just amazing. I've been riveted, and I'm just saying yes to everything. But I just want to reiterate something we always say, and you have alluded to, is people don't know what they don't know. They don't know the unconscious programming is running their show. As Freud or Carl Jung said, until the unconscious is made conscious, it's going to run your show, and you're going to think it's fate. So the reason we go on and on about that all the time is because really most people are operating on a program. So we've done a whole episode on that. I'll put the link below. What is that program? It's in place by 7 years old, just to reiterate that on this episode. And that program is going to run your life until you start recognizing that there's unconscious limiting beliefs. You've got coping mechanisms. You've got ways of dealing with the world. And I've seen it with my own mother, who has vascular dementia, and a friend of mine who recently passed away, who was, his brain was fine, but he was physically absolutely dreadful. He felt he had no meaning and purpose because he no longer worked all day. He wasn't able to contribute anything in his mind. My mother has got all her own stuff, but all the stuff Loretta's saying, there's no judgment in it, but these are very, very important reflections to take seriously if you want to stay healthy and you want to age well. So the benefit of working with somebody like Loretta, if you don't want to choose Loretta, that's fine, but you need to choose a good person who can help you more speedily, excuse my English, to get to the awareness and recognition of that program that's unknowingly possibly running your show. And because Loretta has got processes and experience of taking people through that so that they can access that stuff. She has tools to help them. And there are other people that do this, but you need to get the right help. And then you can bypass a whole years and years. We still have to do the inner work. We still have to
100%.
show up for ourselves. But to access that unconscious stuff, I know, because I've been accessing it for 8 years without much help. It's hard, and it can also kind of mess you up before it makes you better if you don't have the right guidance. So that sounded like a plug for Loretta, but what it actually was I know things cost money, but right now I'm getting help from somebody, a different type of help, who is costing a lot. But without this help, I would have been in big trouble now. So sometimes we just have to invest something to help ourselves along, because the last thing I'm going to say, Loretta, I'm going to hand back to you. I live in a village where when I arrived here at 56, I was the youngest person. It's changed a bit now. So it's a bit of an old age village in the middle of nowhere. So there's certainly not people in old age homes. They're living far away from hospitals. So they're quite brave old people. But I have seen how people age here, and it's fascinating. There's a guy who's 80 who's still... He only recently stopped running up this big hill. Then there's other people. So aging is also not a chronological thing. And we've heard that before, but that's real. You can be 45 and older than somebody who's 75. And yes, genetics does play a role, but a very large part of it is what we do. And the last thing I'm going to throw in from my own experience is I haven't done everything right in my life by any means, and some of it's catching up with me. But the one thing I inadvertently did right is I have exercised every single day of my life since I can remember, somewhere in my 20s, just because I had to. It's what I do. And for 25 years at least now, I've been doing some kind of Pilates, yoga. And I have fallen 3 times. I'm 63 now, so I do sometimes. Well, we all fall, but I have never, ever broken a thing. Even when I've fallen bare, I fell on my head straight down once, and I thought, oh, what, I've broken my neck. I got up, and I was sore, and I took a bit of healing, but I can fall well, or I don't fall. And the only reason I'm highlighting that now as an example, I see people where I live, and it's no judgment. They look young, they look great, but they fall and they've broken an ankle, or they've broken a wrist, or so this stuff is real. And just go and do an exercise class, do a few weights. Anyway, that did sound a bit preachy, but
it's okay. It's our podcast. We can preach, sister, if we want to.
We can preach, and also I always talk from my own experience because I've made a lot of mistakes, and then but I tend to be able to somehow rectify my mistakes. So hopefully I'm on the right path to my last 20 years if I have. So Loretta, back over to you, because this is pure gold for anybody who has the ears for it.
Sure. Thank you, Antoinette. I have actually run out of things to say. One thing I just want to reiterate that the one thing that I have also been I'm fairly health conscious, right? And I've done a lot of this kind of work. But the one thing that I have consistently done since I was a teenager is exercise. Different forms at different times, different things, some crazier and wackier than others. But consistently, it is probably one of the biggest preventers of degeneration and illness. So if you do nothing else, but you're sedentary, please just start moving your body. It's really, it makes a huge difference to your health. And it doesn't have to be 20 times a week. Just start. Okay, just start doing something.
And the other thing about exercising, it's just been my experience, is that because I've lived alone most of my life, but when I go somewhere, well, I've lived in nature for a long time now, but even when I lived in a city, when you go to a class, an exercise class or a gym, or walk on the beach or down the road, you always meet people.
100%.
And so I have had so many connections. Sometimes, since I've lived in a more country setting, but even in the city, real connections. They may not be your best friend or your sister, but it is also a way of connecting. So it can all work together. And food is critical.
Sure.
But I've been a healthy eater, but I've done other stuff wrong. For me, it's been the unconscious stuff, the mental stuff. So yeah, let me not rabbit on. I'm excited that you have access to this information. And if you're 30, get on it. Like Loretta says, don't wait until you're 60 odd or 70.
Yeah. I am going to do just a shameless plug for myself in that I have it's 4 or 5, and I'll tell you why it's 4 or 5, because you have a choice of making it 4 or 5 session program that really teaches you the fundamentals of uncovering your unconscious limiting beliefs, how to connect to what it is that you'd love, and how to actually step into that power of becoming your own healer. Whether you are ill or not, you don't have to be ill. You can take any area of your life. We can work on that. And it doesn't heal you. It doesn't solve all your problems in 5 weeks. But what it does do is it gives you the fundamentals. It gives you the basic tools so that you can actually take your journey forward. So if you're interested in that, please send me an email. I'm happy to send you all the details. And then we can get cracking. Thank you so much for listening once again. If you did find this useful, please will you share the link with your friends. Thank you to those of you who listen to this podcast every week. We really appreciate it. Thank you for those of you who take the time and the trouble to leave a comment on YouTube in particular. That's where we can see the comments. We really do appreciate it. And we'll see you again next week with some more missing links in your healing.
Yeah, thank you, Loretta. That was so valuable. And I'd like to just add in, if you do connect with Loretta through the podcast, just please mention that you're on our podcast. It's not easy to keep statistics when you podcast, and we just value knowing what's working, what resonates with people. And so, yeah, please communicate with us and ask any questions. Okay, Loretta, are we done? We did it in under an hour. Well done.
I talk really fast. You may have to slow down the speed to catch some of the info. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Antoinette.
Bye, Loretta. Bye.
Bye.